Hello my wonderful viewers, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands comes out in just a short time, and if you're anything like me, then you're actually feeling pretty excited for this new entry. Borderlands 3 was incredibly solid when it first came out, only really held back by its narrative. But regardless how the game handled the raw mechanics and feel for how everything worked felt like the natural evolution from Borderlands 2. But despite how people initially felt about certain characters, story plot points, or even how in-game mechanics were handled, something really great wound up happening as a result. The DLCs. What I'm talking about is that the quality of Borderlands 3's DLCs showed clear signs of improvement in all aspects from the base game. Most players, I would say, think that Krieg's Fustercluck delivered a very meaningful and emotional story that was more than satisfactory. They've heard the complaints about Ava's personality and have begun trying to ground her to reality. And the guns, quality. It felt like everyone working on the game began refining and honing their craft better and better as the game went on. So when it comes to Wonderlands, their quality should be at an all-time high, and that's partly the reason I'm so excited. So I decided to make a list of things that I'm hoping for out of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. I should preface this by saying I am not a gameplay expert or anything like that. If you know my channel, you know I'm much more interested in the story and lore. Gameplay-wise, I consider myself incredibly casual. I also haven't been consuming too much of the gameplay reveals and stuff like that. I wanted to keep myself relatively blind to everything I'm going to experience. I have watched most of the trailers and such, but I haven't dissected them to any extent or anything. So some things may have already been revealed and confirmed, I don't know. But anyway, here are some things I'm looking for out of Wonderlands. Starting things off, it's the weapons. One of the first things I noticed while watching the gameplay trailers was just how unique some of the weapons functioned. They might have the COV design or the Jacobs shotgun look, but they don't act like how they normally would in Borderlands 3. They all have these weird quirks. They rain arrows from the sky. Their bullet spread isn't just that of bullets. And I'm hoping that this is the standard. If the guns wind up feeling copy and pasted from Borderlands 3, then the game might feel more like a DLC and less of its own unique thing. Admittedly, it'd be a very large DLC with craploads of new content, so I'm not saying it'll feel cheap, but what I'm saying is that if the standard for guns are these quirks to fit the magical setting, then the entire gameplay should hopefully feel familiar while also being brand new. That's not even taking into account the skill classes and grenades or spells or what have you that already seem to shake things up. This is only in regards to the guns. My hope is that the majority of weapons aren't just gun with normal bullet. I mean, it's fair to think that some of them probably will be, but weirdly enough, this game allows them to get even wackier with what some of the guns can do without having to have them make logical sense. Staying on the topic of weapons, my next hope is for less diluted legendaries. If you've played Borderlands 3, then you know just how easy it is to get legendaries and just how frequently you got them. And to me, it made everything feel worse because of just how terrible some of these so-called legendaries actually are. A lot of them can feel like normal guns with just a slight quirk, and those could easily be shifted into the unique category, making them still do what they do, but without having to live up to the expectation of what a legendary should be. It should be something you rarely get unless you're actively farming for it over and over again. But once you do get it, it should feel powerful. Even if it has some kind of quirk that makes it a bit odd compared to a normal gun, the damage or whatever it is should have a noticeable impact on what it was designed for. I love getting legendaries, but that feeling of excitement when one drops was lost on me in 3. I understand that getting legendaries is a very rewarding feeling for the player when it happens, so they want to make them feel good for playing their game, but if you make it too normal, then it no longer feels special. I hope that Wonderlands actually scales back the rate in which you get legendaries. That, or as I've heard some people hoping for, the return of pearlescence. The one rarity above legendary that has yet to make a return since the original game. If there is going to be a rarity that you have to work to get for, then I don't care which one it is, so long as it's far from a common drop. One of the biggest things I'm looking forward to seeing is how Wonderlands takes an approach to its story. One of the biggest draws to Assault on Dragon's Keep and what has allowed it to stand the test of time was the type of story it decided to tell. Having Tina use this tabletop game to cope with her grief and see everything physically manifest in front of our eyes was such an unexpected turn for that story. From comedy to tragedy, it masterfully executed on it. But I don't know if that same type of story would ever work again. It probably wouldn't be wise to try and catch that same lightning in a bottle in the exact same premise because it will feel incredibly repetitive, especially with Tina as the DM again. So it makes me believe Wonderlands is going to be more along the lines of what we expected the original to be, a more fun and loose fantasy adventure ran by the chaotic energy that is Tina through and through. You know, without all of the heavy baggage and trauma she's been through. But her life is pretty much all trauma, so it's to be expected. On one hand, I am a sucker for serious stories that try to, at the very least, pull off some sort of character development or something. But on the other hand, I recognize that they've already done that with Tina, and it'd probably be smart to just have fun and focus on comedy and try to entertain the player for this title. One way or the other, I'm not expecting too much out of the story, so I'll likely not be disappointed, unless they really drop the ball. But if it is more of the fun and comedic route, I'm still hoping that we get some sort of meaningful takeaway from the story. I don't know what that may be, or even which character/characters we get that from, but I hope Wonderlands is a title I have reason to explain to others to play outside of LOL. Borderlands 2, you hear how Handsome Jack is one of gaming's greatest villains. Tales from the Borderlands was a surprisingly great narrative which many people still don't expect out of Borderlands. And Wonderlands, I'm hoping there is a reason I can explain to others why they have to play it, even if it's just story. So long as this story can't be easily glossed over and ignored, then that's good enough for me. Speaking of story and Tina, that's not to say the story should be solely focused on Tina, because we are at the very least getting two new characters in the form of Valentine and Fret. I do find it slightly interesting that they've decided to add new characters instead of playing with the ones that we already have. Not to say that that's a bad thing, but what does adding two new characters we know nothing about do differently than playing with the ones we already have? I know that it's a new game, so it makes sense to add new characters, but because they're so new, that means there's more ground to cover with them, their backstories, who they are, why they're playing this game with us, developing that whole storyline throughout the course of the game. It makes sense because doing that could fill in a lot of the downtime between sessions and is probably going to be used as an excuse to explain the rules to us. But that could also be dangerous because there's the risk that they're not interesting and can't carry their end of the story. The original DLC did great with Lilith, Mordecai, and Brick as its players. So there is the idea that they could have just replaced those three and did a story, but instead we're getting new characters. Maybe it's because we've all just been traumatized by Ava. How could we ever trust the addition of a new character ever again? But I still think Tina is going to be the main draw. She's likely going to do the majority of the lifting. I have a feeling they're more going to be the sprinkles to Tina's ice cream. So I'm intrigued to see what these two are going to bring to the table. But something I find particularly interesting based on the trailers is the lack of us as the player. By that, I mean Tina is the DM, we have Valentine and Fret playing with us, but who are we? The trailers all play out like we are a fill-in-the-blank, a faceless embodiment of an in-universe character that is playing the game as one of the classes. Usually, you just assume that you're the Vault Hunter, but considering that this isn't Borderlands 3, we could be anyone, and honestly, I would like to be someone. I'm not a huge fan of the whole "you're you" approach. You get to pretend like you're in the game right next to everyone. They're talking to me. No matter the game, I'm not a fan of it. And just thinking ahead for future Borderlands installments and the idea of returning characters, cause you know, there's a great war coming up. If Valentine and Fret don't die in this game, then they're likely to return in some capacity. So the same would theoretically go for our character as well, meaning we'd need a third-person point of view to see who we are in-universe should they ever return. Granted, I could be reading this all wrong, maybe we're playing as Valentine and Fret? I don't know, but the way I've been seeing the trailers, it felt like I was my own perspective. I can definitely see some kind of joke right at the very end of the game when you beat everything and it reveals that you are actually Pickle this entire time, just to troll everyone because of how much they hate him. But yeah, I hope that we are actually playing as a character, even if they don't talk, and the class that we're playing as holds all of the personality, which is what it already looks like. But so long as we are a person, I will be satisfied. My final hope for this video is in regards to endgame. Now, there's never been anything inherently wrong with Borderlands' approach to endgame content. Yes, 3 could have benefited from some kind of raid boss much earlier, preferably at launch. But I'm looking for something new outside of just farming for better gear. The idea that there is more to do and complete, even if it's just purely psychological. As someone who considers himself a completionist, just the mere aspect of adding a visual display of things that you can do and what hasn't been done goes a long way. Like, in a way, stick with me, I'd equate Borderlands feeling like Pokemon if Pokemon didn't display your Pokedex and the amount of Pokemon you've collected. So inherently you'd feel more inclined just to build the best team and not collect them all. And Borderlands, I would say, is similar, but with weapons. Once you've attained the build that does 1 billion damage, what else is there to do aside from do it again, but with different stuff? And that's great for the hardcore numbers guy who understands the damage maths. But it needs a more casual aspect. You've collected 40 out of the 100 different legendaries. You've got 9 out of the 12 echo logs in this location. Just adding lists like that can make a big difference. And most certainly not in the way badass challenges or guardian rank challenges are. Those are so diluted with nonsense, you don't care about them. Getting headshots, killing X amount of enemies, running over X amount of enemies, whatever, those numbers and lists no one cares about and dilutes a good way to trick the player into doing things. Listing the echo logs, legendaries, uniques, and even enemy type encountered, which could really go into the RPG element, showcasing their weaknesses if you've used it on them. So it'll show that, say, human types are weak to fire if you've already used fire on them. If not, it'll showcase as mysteries. I just got done playing Bravely Default 2, so I'm using that as an example. But just those nerdy stats, the important stats, easy, good way to feign extra endgame content. Of course, actual endgame content is important too. I'm not saying that. There should be like a raid boss at launch or something like that from the get-go. But like lists, I can't tell you how easy it is for someone to keep playing if there's an unfinished list in their face. Even more so if there's an achievement tied to it. Just saying. It may not be something you're inclined to do on every character, but at some point, at least once. You're gonna want to try and 100% a game if it tells you you can. Anyway, there you have it. Those are some of the things I'm hoping for in Wonderlands. This by no means is an indicator of how much I will enjoy the game. I hope that I get some of these things. But that's about it. I think the game is still going to be amazing regardless, but for now, that does it for this video. What are some things you're hoping for out of Wonderlands? Gameplay, story, whatever? Let me know in the comments below, and until next time, I'll see you in the next video.